Welcome back. Now, the Shadow Defence Secretary, James Cartlidge, joins me. James Cartlidge, thank you very much for joining us this morning. Concerns about the defence budget, of course, this week, the Defence Investment Plan. We hear that it's only going to go up by 0.08% by 2030. The Conservatives saying this is not enough. But isn't it right that under the Conservatives, the army was depleted to the size it hasn't been since the Napoleonic Wars?
Well, look, the first thing to say is, look, you're absolutely right to focus on the amount of money going into defence. I think everyone knows that 0.08% is nothing like enough, and we know that John Healey himself, the previous Defence Secretary, thought that that's why he resigned. In terms of our policy, we've said since February last year, just not long after Kemi became leader, that defence spending should go to 3% this Parliament. That's actually now the view of the House Commons Select Committee, so it's actually a widely held view across parties, but we feel very strongly it needs to go to 3% this Parliament. As to what happened previously, I'm very proud of what we did to support Ukraine. It was an incredible intervention that helped, keep Ukraine in the fight and avoid what would have been a military disaster. But I've always been very open, and I think we should all be, that defence spending fell pretty much year on year since the fall of the Berlin Wall, because we thought we had peace. Well, we don't now. It's very, very different. The threat is much greater. So we need to increase defence spending to 3%, and we think a big part of that has got to come from cutting welfare and making our country stronger.
I mean, we've known for years and years and years that there are threats. And we've known for years and years that people in the know, experts, people in the armed forces have said we need more money for defence. Who is really more to blame for the current state of our armed forces? Is it the government elected 2 years ago? Or is it the Conservative Party who were in power for 14 years? I mean, in 2010, the British Army had 107,000 personnel. In 2024, the British Army only had 72,500 full-time trained soldiers. Our army is smaller because of the Conservatives.
Well, I mean, if you went back further, since 1945, you'd find that the army has fallen pretty much every year since the Second World War, and at times very large numbers. I mean, obviously demobilisation, but that was a very exceptional thing. But we had the end of national service. We had, pulling back from some of what was becoming the former empire, as it were, and then we had the end of the Cold War. So actually, that trend has been pretty much the same. There's only 2 prime ministers who have presided over an army that was bigger when they left office than when they came into it since the Second World War, Gordon Brown and Alec Douglas Home. We've set out a fully funded plan that comes from restoring the 2-child benefit cap, which would see the army increase back to 80,000 and 40,000 reservists, because we think reserves are a big part of this as well. So that would be a significant increase in the size of the army. But it has to be said, and I think it's a really important thing. So are you saying that the Conservative Party, number of people.
Are you saying that the Conservative Party were just too relaxed? How much spending we needed? Or what? Because you're saying, OK, since the World War II, defence spending has gone down. I think in 1994 is the last time we spent over 3% of GDP on defence. Are you admitting that the Conservatives got it wrong, that you were just far too relaxed? We're told now that we face a huge number of threats.
No, I'm not saying that at all. It was 1996, the year before Blair came in, when we were in government, that the government last spent 3% on defence. I'm not relaxed at all. What I said was, in government, we did something very extraordinary on defence, which was to stand by Ukraine. No one else did that. Nigel Farage blamed NATO and wouldn't have done anything, clearly. Other countries, did respond, but only after we showed that leadership. So I'm proud of that. But I said, in terms of defence spending over decades, it has fallen, and that's because we thought we had peace. But it must be obvious to everyone we don't now. So what I set out to you was our plan to start rebuilding the size of the army in terms of the number of regulars, back up to 80,000, and reserves up to 40,000. But the point I was going to make was that is absolutely just one part of it. It's much more than that. They need to be able to fight as war is fought today. And the key thing there is drones and uncrewed warfare. I did a lot on that when I was Minister for Defence Procurement. We gave incredible capability to Ukraine, drones and counter-drone, which I wanted to bring into service with our armed forces. But when we got to the general election, and we had a fully funded plan to do that, Labour put that on hold. This is a key thing. It's not just about the money. They put all of this progress on hold to draw up their strategic defence review and then the defence investment plan. We've had this sort of paralysis for 2 years. So I do think that they have to shoulder a lot of responsibility. We had led the way in some key areas. I mean, the Dragonfire laser, which can take down drones to protect our ships, we were doing that in government. A lot of this has if it's progressed, it's been too slow. So I do think they have to shoulder some of the responsibility. But the point is, going forward, the country want to know one thing: where's the money going to come from? We've set out what we would do, and I hope that Labour will now think again and give a more generous settlement to defence.
I mean, you mentioned drones. There is a stark warning in the Times newspaper today, in the Sunday Times, that apparently we've only got 8,000 drones, and to put that into context, Ukraine uses roughly 200,000 a month in their war with Russia, defending off Russia. That is stark, incredibly worrying. How long will it take to get the number of drones where they should be, for example?
Well, it's a really interesting question, because actually something John Healey said, I think a week or two ago, may not have had much pickup, but to me very important. He said, well, there's a problem when you procure lots of drones and you're not actually at war like Ukraine and Russia, that you stick them in a shed and they go out of date very quickly. So something we've set out as a policy in opposition, that I've set out as Shadow Defence Secretary, is we'd establish a sovereign defence fund. I announced this on your programme some months ago. This would have £2 billion a year of R&D and £11 billion from the net zero funding in the National Wealth Fund. This would all go on defence and defence tech, so AI, drones, autonomy. And for me, the key is we've got to change the way we procure. We've got to procure drones more like a service. If you just buy one and stick it in a shed, it does go out of date quickly. What we've got to do is change the way the Army, Navy and Air Force train, the way they test. So I want to have companies, British SMEs, that are embedded on Salisbury Plain with the British Army, that are working with them when they start training with drones, adapting, in other words, mirroring how war is fought today. The most important cultural change in modern warfare is this constant adaptation. We've got to do that in a training setting so that we're ready if war comes. And if you do that, the volume will start to increase. But in parallel, and you make a very good point about the capacity and the number of drones we need, our Sovereign Defence Fund, as I say, 11 billion from net zero into the defence industry. That's to help SMEs scale up so that they can meet, first of all, the demand for much more drones for testing and training, but ultimately ready, if we do have war, to massively scale up drone production.
We've been talking about threats to our country from abroad and the need to up defence spending, but a lot of our viewers, a lot of GB News viewers watching this show will be deeply concerned about the state of our borders. Now, the horrific attack in Belfast, the alleged attacker, I have to be careful here, of course, because a man has been charged. The alleged attacker reportedly entered the United Kingdom in 2023 when the Conservatives were in power. At the time, applications from Sudan had a 96% success rate through a fast-track system. So are the Conservatives to blame for this suspect entering the country and a knife attack taking place in this hideous manner?
Well, as you rightly said, we have to be careful what we say on the specific case, because it is what's called sub judice, i.e. it's a live criminal case. But it's fair to make the general point that it would appear that we may have an issue here on the Irish border. Of course, the Irish border is complicated. We've, for many, many years, had this common travel area, which is important to both countries. But, when I was in government, 23, 24, the key focus then was the small boats, quite rightly. And we brought in the Rwanda plan. Unfortunately, Labour defeated it in the Lords, it was defeated in the courts, and we had that whack-a-mole game of we tried to pass it, they kept trying to stop it. But it has to be said, if there is another route, there is another way now to breach that, presumably smaller in scale. Clearly, we have to look at that, but I do think it will be complicated because of the Irish border.
James Cartlidge, why on earth?
We must be wary of not drawing too many conclusions.
Why on earth did we have a fast-track system for people coming from Sudan, one of the most dangerous countries in the world, a 96% success rate? We know when it comes to small boats as well, we've only had 4% of people deported. This Conservative government and now the Labour government putting our country at risk.
Look, at the time, and I wasn't a Home Office Minister, I was in the MOD and before that in the Treasury, total priority was on the small boats. Your viewers, the country at large, incredibly angry about what was happening, and I think we did a lot to try and fix that with our Rwanda plan. Unfortunately, it couldn't become law because it was defeated in the House of Lords repeatedly, with Labour whipping against it. But I take your point. There is a concern here on the Irish border in terms of the prioritisation of individual groups. I think the key thing is, we're under new leadership with Kemi, and she set out her borders plan, which is that if you enter the country illegally, irrespectively, you cannot claim asylum. And I think that's a really important change. We've got our borders plan, and also about fast deportation, and I think that's really positive, and it shows we are learning from what we did in government, so that we now have a much stronger proposition for the British people and for your viewers.
OK, now just back to defence for a moment. The Prime Minister this morning says that he directed our armed forces to intercept a Shadow Fleet oil tanker attempting to pass through the English Channel, saying this delivers yet another blow to Russia, reminds those fueling Putin's war that we will not let them hide. This is good news, isn't it?
Yeah, we support this action. I mean, notwithstanding the fact that there have been a lot of shadow vessels passing through our waters and nothing seems to have happened, I welcome the fact that they've intercepted this vessel, obviously subject to the fact we only know a relatively small amount of information, and I pay tribute to the Royal Marines and the Navy and Royal Air Force personnel who've joined in, because we do have brilliant people in our armed forces, and this shows they can do the job if you give them the kit, and if you have a government willing to lead. So I hope this is a sign of things to come under the new Defence Secretary. We do need to send a strong signal to Russia, but part of that strong signal, it has to be said, is instead of the shambles of recent days that we've had with the Defence Investment Plan, the Prime Minister's got to get a grip, and from our point of view that means finding the money, and I think everyone now sees that, and a big part of that means getting on top of our welfare bill to give our armed forces, so that it's not the...
We need to spend on defence.